Hello, and thanks for tuning in to Town Meeting TV's coverage of Town Meeting Day 2025. My name is Emily Brewer, and I am going to be moderating this afternoon. This program is part of a series of candidate forums hosted by Town Meeting TV in advance of the Town Meeting Day election on Tuesday, March 4th, which is exactly 2 weeks away from today. These forums are made possible by Town Meeting TV's generous underwriting partners. Thank you very much. You can find all our forums at cctv.org/TMD2025 or on our Town Meeting TV YouTube channel where auto-generated captions are available. If you're tuning in on YouTube, click the subscribe button to stay tuned into local democracy this election season. And this is actually the last week of forums before our election results show. So on this afternoon's program, I am joined by uncontested Williston Select Board candidates, Ted Kenny and Ellie Beckett. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, uncontested, so Ted is running for the 2-year term seat on the Williston Select Board. He is an incumbent candidate. And Ellie Beckett is running for the 3-year term seat on the Select Board. So we do have a prepared list of questions for each of you. You'll have 90 seconds to answer each question. Rebuttals, if you guys want a rebuttal since you're uncontested, you guys can just kind of have a conversation with each other about something. And for folks that are tuning in live, we welcome your questions. You can call in at 802-862-3966. If you call in, we'll do our best to prioritize your question, and but we will screen calls to ensure that questions are not repeated. And please, if you do call in, share your name, your town, and we'll answer your question. So with that, we'll get started with opening statements, and we'll start with Ted. Could you please tell us what you love about Williston and why you want to continue to serve on the Williston Select Board?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
It's a big public benefit that this place provides, and it's very much appreciated. I love Williston for a lot of different reasons. I moved to Williston in 1999, but before that I grew up in Richmond, one town over. I had an uncle that had a operational farm in Williston. It's still there, and cousins that were cousins that were about my age, and so we spent a lot of time in Williston, in the what's now called the Ag Rural District. I moved there in 1999 when I got married, and it is just an incredible place to live and raise a family. It is vibrant. It continues to have an agricultural component to its identity. It continues to have a sense of community that really is true. It's really there. It's not just hyperbole or PR. The thing mainly about Williston that I love, besides those things, those are the main ones, but also that it has a vibrant sense of growth and change. I mean, we have Taft's Corners, which is where most people think of when they think of Williston, and I think that's inaccurate, but it is there. That in terms of being on the Select Board, that gives us a 1% sales tax, which accounts for about 40% of the budget. I know that development is a big issue oftentimes, but it's also, we can't stop it. And so I want to continue serving on Williston Select Board to try to manage our transition and keep what we have that's great.
Awesome, thank you so much, Ted. And Ellie, same question for you. What do you love about Williston and why do you want to serve on the Select Board?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm running for the 3-year seat on the Williston Select Board. I'm running to continue my service to the town of Williston and pay back all the gifts this community has given me and my family. I'm running to bring a new energy and a fresh perspective to the Select Board. I want to serve. My mother's example of public service has really shaped my life. She was town clerk in Williston for 20 years and a member of the Army National Guard. My own experiences growing up in Williston and being a young woman trying to build my life in our town now have shown me that we must both keep Williston's historic identity and sense of community and manage the growth that will come. So if elected, my priorities are the following. Housing, number one. We need to support local regulations that meet the need to increase housing stock and variety, but don't overwhelm town resources and school capacity. small business support. Now more than ever, we need to attract, retain, and assist our small business owners who will continue to make Williston a place where people want to be. And natural resource protection. Williston must protect its green space and undeveloped land by continuing to concentrate that growth within the growth center and then ensuring that we have an adequately funded environmental reserve fund.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for both of you. And we'll go right down the line here. And we're going to start with this next question that has to do with the town budget with Ellie.
Sure.
So do you support the proposed town budget of $15.9 million, representing an increase of about $890,000 or 5.9% from last year?
I do support it. The majority of the increase, about 4.6 of it, is for maintaining current levels of staff and the addition of a much needed HR position. So we have a truly fantastic town staff and we want to ensure that we keep them. And then the HR position is critical at this point. There's over 80 full-time employees at the town and another couple dozen who are seasonal. So just the town has reached its the level of needing this, and it shouldn't continue to be kind of the side job of several other employees who already have full plates otherwise.
Okay, thank you. And Ted, this same question about the budget for you.
I do support it. It's a good. This budget is it does increase by 5.9%, but the town is continuing to grow. So it's not like it's a static town and we just added 5.9% on top of the budget just to do it. I mean, we need this to increase and maintain, actually, not even increase, but maintain the level of services that we provide. Roads, public safety, recreational, things like that. About half of the town budget goes to public safety things, fire department, police, EMS. The need for that is pretty impressive because Williston has about 10,000 people who live there, but during the day, the population swells to over 20,000 people. So we need infrastructure, safety infrastructure for about 20,000 people. Now, that extra 10,000 people aren't taking advantage of us because, again, the 1% sales tax that brings about 40% of the budget in on us. But this budget was, we're still in a difficult inflationary cycle that we're just getting, hopefully, just getting out of. And if we don't keep pace with the current needs, then we're really just, almost taking a loan out against the future, where we're going to have to make up for the things that we didn't take care of when we should have. Nobody likes to pay taxes. I don't like to pay taxes, but it is a balanced budget that does a good job of keeping everything in line with everything else. So yeah.
Okay. And this next question is right around those same lines, which has to do with the school budget. So school taxes represent about 85% of the Williston taxpayers' bill. The Champlain Valley School District has proposed a school budget of $102.7 million. Do you support this budget as proposed? And a follow-up question is, what is your understanding of the current challenges to the state education fund and how they might impact CSVD schools, Champlain Valley School District's schools and taxpayers? And we'll go to Ted.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to be clear. I'm not on the school board, and I am no expert on the school budget. What I have done to research it and just to learn about it as a citizen and as a taxpayer and whose kids went through these schools, I do support it. I think it looks like it's a pretty reasonable budget. It looks like they've made a big effort to make cuts. I think it actually lowers the property tax rate compared to otherwise. In terms of state issues, I'm not the expert, and I don't know that I would know that. I'm glad that the Scott administration is putting out proposals for change. I think they should be given a fair hearing. I'm not liking some of the stuff I'm seeing. I'm not liking the idea of this school choice thing that's happening, that would happen if it just was adopted as is, because that usually ends up being that the school gets to make the choice about the student, not the student getting to choose the school. But schools have had it hard in Vermont. Again, with inflation, with growth, with aging populations, and I think they've done a good job. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ted. And Ellie, the same question about supporting the school budget.
I do support the school budget. I agree with everything Ted said. But I think last year's town meeting votes statewide and November's shakeup in the legislature gave the message loud and clear that we can't continue funding education the way we have, and that something needs to change. I think in broad strokes, the governor's proposal to change up the formula and consolidate some districts are ideas I can get behind, but the devil is really in the details, and I'm worried about how the proposed changes will impact CVSD. And hearing concerns from CVSD leadership, it sounds like the proposal will have, as presented, will have negative impacts on the quality of education in our region. I also agree with the CVSD leadership that the proposed district of 34,000 students is just too large. So I'm just hopeful that by the end of the legislative session that we'll see something that looks different.
Okay, great, thank you. So this next question has to do with voter impact. So as you both know, last March, the town and school budget were rejected by the voters of Williston on the first ballot. Do you think that the voters have been heard? And as a follow-up, what was that message? And we'll start with Ellie.
Sure. As I said before, I think the message was received that school funding needs to change. And as you said, the municipal budget is only 15% of Williston's overall tax bill. And we have one of the lowest municipal tax rates in the county due to our local options tax. So by proposing a budget whose increase is largely maintaining current services and adding only needed positions in HR and public safety, I think the Select Board has listened to voters that extraneous tax increases won't be tolerated right now.
Great. And Ted, the same question about voter impact.
I think the voters had a pretty strong message last time that they felt like being taxed too much. The weird thing about property taxes in Vermont is the way they're presented is that it is one property tax bill, going back to the days before there was a state property tax rate, et cetera. That means that voters get one bill. And when they get that, I don't know that they realize that only 15% of that property tax bill is the municipal rate, the town rate, the one the Select Board can control. The rest of it is school. I'm not bad-mouthing the school at all. I think they've done a good job this year, but it's not much of how much you're actually paying in property taxes. Our budget does have a tax increase, and I wish I could have found a way to avoid that. But as Ellie said articulately, we've only added an HR person, which we're one of the only towns our size that doesn't have one. And we added one police officer and one social worker for the police department, which is what all the policing science says you should do, so that you don't just keep putting out a fire. You actually address why the fire is happening in the first place. But I think people are getting a little bit upset with the tax rates, and I share that. I don't like to pay taxes any more than anybody else, but I think we've listened to them, and I think this budget addresses that.
Okay, all right, thank you both. And we're going to move right along to this question about what folks will see on their ballot, which is, do you support half a penny assessed on the grand list for the purpose of the town's environmental reserve fund? And we'll start with Ted.
Yeah, well, I do. It's an interesting point that it's going to be a separate ballot item, because that means that the voters get to decide directly, very much like an old-time Vermont town meeting, where you can make a motion from the floor to change something in the budget, and then everybody votes on it. The Environmental Reserve Fund right now has about $570,000 in it. That's not enough. The idea of it is that it is a savings account that the town will use when it gets generally what is short notice that a property is coming up for sale that should be conserved or bought for the public. And $570,000 isn't enough to really do anything on that. Frankly, if this is the time for confessions, we've been underfunding that. Because we've had such tough budgets going through this inflationary cycle that it's been very difficult to put in the money that it deserves while funding all the other things that the town does. So I hope that people vote for it. It preserves open space, it protects natural resources, and it adds to potential parklands. And it's let's see what the voters say.
Thank you very much. And Ellie, the same question about the Environmental Reserve Fund.
Well, as I said in my opening statements, yeah, I absolutely do support it. The ballot measure would equate to about an additional $15 per household annually if renewed. And I mean, I really think we need to adequately fund the Environmental Reserve Fund. It's conserved over 3,000 acres since 1989. With an adequately funded Environmental Reserve Fund, Williston can be a more active participant in ensuring green space and undeveloped land and viewsheds are conserved. Without a robust Environmental Reserve Fund, the town takes itself largely out of the conversation when developmental discussions are on the table. So we don't use funds from the reserve fund often, but I think there will come a time when either we'll be glad that we made this investment in the town's future, or we will wish we had.
Okay, thank you both for that. And we're going to stick with Ellie for this next question, which has to do with policing. So what do you think is working well for Williston in policing and public safety?
Well, our police department has a really large volume of calls, and I think they do a great job managing all of these calls with the resources they have. I think our department also does a really good job of adapting and thinking creatively and looking forward and outward at national models of what best practices are and trying to adapt and add different tools to the toolbox. Not every call is going to require the same type of response. And so when we do things like invest in our community justice center or add a social worker, that gives our department multiple options with how to respond in ways that are more tailored to the issues at hand. So I think our department's doing a great job with that.
Awesome. And Ted, we'll move on to you.
Yeah. I think our police department is very good. We got lucky with the police chief that we hired a couple of years ago, and he is both experienced and innovative. But we do need more. We need another police officer, and we need a social worker. The average patrol officer in Williston last year answered over 620 calls, and they don't work 365 days a year. So that's a lot of calls that they each answer. Last year, there were all these media reports that Williston has become the shoplifting capital of the state, and statistically, it has. That's not the police department's fault. There's a lot of other stuff going on. But we need that new patrol officer, because every time a police officer goes to a shoplifting response or something else, they're not available for something that is maybe more urgent. Same thing with the social worker. When we have a social worker on staff, then we can have people get pointed toward the services that are actually out there. And there are services that are out there. We're not living in the Great Depression or something. Times are hard, but they're not there. And if we could get these people who are calling 911 to be able to be hooked up with services, then that will reduce the pressure on law enforcement in Williston. Last thing I'd say is that we had a report done by former state police head and former corrections commissioner Baker, the Baker report, and that actually emphasizes a lot of different structural changes to the police department, but not the least of which is emphasizing more of the alternative justice response. There is even a proposal in there that I think would be great if we can get there, where the alternative justice rep board, CJC type places would be at Taft's Corners, so that if there is a shoplifting, if there is a minor offense like that, that person could be taken immediately there, and it'd be one-stop shopping. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen.
All right, thank you. And this next question has to do with climate change. So how is Williston dealing with the impacts of climate change? And what can the Select Board do to reduce emissions and prepare for climate impacts? And we're going to start with Ted on this question.
Yeah, I'd say there are a number of things that the town is doing and doing well. When the town garage was redone, solar panels were put on top of the town garage. We also have solar arrays behind Town Hall in the meadow there. Those two things both have about 80% of the electric use of the municipal buildings in town. So that's a great template for going forward with what we should be doing. We also actually had an EV charging station that was put in the village park, so that if people, and that's a very busy park, particularly on the weekends, particularly during soccer, but it's, that will give people who have electric vehicles the ability to recharge. We also use some of our American Rescue Act funds to pay for the renovation of the town hall parking lot. And in that, we're wiring it up. It has to be wired up for lighting anyway, because right now it's one of the problems with it is very dark parking lot and it's dangerous. But the wiring will actually be included so that we can, in the future, have the wiring that's there for EV charging stations going forward. One pet peeve thing is that somebody came in the last town meeting and made it sound like we were going to give the electricity away for free. That's not the case at all. But it would be available. And the last thing is that we have clean energy standards that our committee has just forwarded to us that we're looking at about going forward with new construction and how much of it will have to be fossil fuel versus not fossil fuel for heating and cooling.
Okay, thank you. And Ellie, this question on climate change.
Sure. I mean, there's only so much that can be done at the municipal level, but there is absolutely a role there. I think in large part having the mechanisms in place to have bodies that are specifically focusing on environmental impacts and seizing those opportunities to implement changes when and where possible. The town has a very active energy committee, along with other groups like Sustainable Williston, that ensure climate change impacts and mitigation efforts stay at top of mind and that emerging technologies are on our radar.
Thank you.
Oh, also.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There was a second bullet.
No problem.
Our town's planning director, Matt Boulanger, will sometimes say, and I believe this, that the best climate plan is a good land use plan. And so that concentrating development in compact community centers makes homes more efficient and takes more vehicles off the road. So I think that's a huge part of the municipality's responsibility.
Okay, great, thank you. And that's a good segue into our next question, which has to do with development. So Ellie, can you identify a current development project in Williston that you're proud of and that contributes to the town's sustainable economic growth?
Sure. While it's not a specific development, I think the town's form-based code that was passed a couple of years ago in the Taft Corners Growth Center will help us achieve our environmental and economic goals. The code changes the paradigm from dictating what types of activities occur where to caring more about how the development relates to each other in the area, and it creates a more cohesive community center. So while it was passed a couple of years ago, we're only now starting to see the first developments under that code come to fruition. So I am very excited to see how that continues to build out over the next several years.
Awesome, thank you. And Ted, this question for you.
I'd say two things. One is the Glazer project. It's going to be a 106-home housing development that allows the preservation of a view shed on Mountain View Road. It also has, the owners came to the town, actually came to the Planning Commission, and worked with the town on how they could develop it to suit their own, obviously development needs, but also what the town is looking for. And it's a really good project. They've got bike paths and a view shed, and there's a meadow that is being used right now by Windswept Farms, which is a horse farm in Williston, that the town is going to rent back to the horse farm so that they can continue haying it and using it for agricultural purposes. That's the kind of thing that I think is just really something to be proud of. The other would be the form-based code that Ellie was talking about. That it's very exciting to see what the development is going to happen, where it's going to be walkable, bikeable neighborhoods with commercial on top and residential on top, commercial on the bottom, and then office and residential on top, and it's an exciting vision of the future.
Awesome, thank you. And I do want to just take a moment to remind folks, if there's anybody out there watching live, you can call in with questions for Ted and Ellie at 802-862-3966. And in the meantime, we'll keep going down the list here. So Ted, we're going to start with you. This question has to do with civil rights. So given efforts by the new presidential administration to end diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, eliminate protections for transgender people, and reduce immigration, what do you think is the town's role in continuing to address inequities and counteract discrimination in all forms?
Well, the town's got to do what it can legitimately do. The main thing that it has the most power over is its own government. So the town has the ability to continue working with DEI, which I'm in favor of, the select board actually had a DEI training at our retreat a couple of years ago, and it wasn't like what people say think it is. It was a very this sounds like I'm using the terms that people are afraid of, but it was very inclusive. It wasn't judgmental. It wasn't telling people what you have to think or feel or whatever. And it was, these things are important, and we need to keep doing those kinds of things. In terms of a broader effort, unfortunately, let me be clear, I don't want to be partisan about this, but I'm pretty appalled by what's going on the national level right now. But even with me being appalled, there's only so much the town can do in terms of projecting out for things that are bigger social issues like that. So where we can make a difference, we should make a difference. But in terms of like doing stuff that would be mainly symbolic, I've never really been in favor of symbolic action on a municipal level.
Okay. Thank you, Ted. And Ellie, the same question.
Sure. I was actually going to use the same word to describe my feelings about the national picture. I'm also very appalled at that DEI is being used as the scapegoat and the answer for all of government ills, and I mean it's being intentionally used as a distraction to try to focus attention away from some of the other, nefarious things that the administration is doing to undermine our government. So, yeah, that's where I stand with that nationally. And I think as far as Williston goes, I think the town has always been strong in its commitment to improve opportunities for inclusivity and condemn discrimination. And, I don't see any reason why that will change now. And I think the town can respond by trying to lead by example.
Thank you. And so we are running out of time here. We have a couple questions left, but I want to give space for closing statements so that you can let folks know how to contact you and stuff like that. But I think one part of the next question is, what is your vision for the future of Williston? And I think that might be a good way to kind of end the forum, and then with whatever else you'd like to say in your closing statements. So we'll start with you, Ellie.
Sure. Well, I think as far as challenges go, I think locally, statewide, nationally, we're in a housing crisis, and there is a lack of capital AH affordable housing. But in addition to that, there's also a significant lack of starter homes, or the first and second rung on the home ownership ladder. There should be more between one-bedroom rentals and $500,000 homes. And I recognize we're in a current economic climate where building anything else right now doesn't necessarily pencil out. But at a town level, I think that there may be more ways we can adjust zoning or reduce duplicative regulation or make it easier for folks to build incrementally, like converting homes into duplexes or creating accessory dwelling units or adapting existing structures. I think, additionally, concentrating growth in the growth center, a theme of tonight, where infrastructure already exists, could theoretically make overall project costs more reasonable at the end of the day. And so I know the Select Board is currently in the middle of a feasibility study to determine if it would make financial sense to implement a tax increment financing district. And I don't know what the results of that study will be, but I do know that statewide TIF districts have made a huge impact in the cities and towns that have them. So I'm excited to see what the results of that are. And all that said, I understand that many residents are wary of more development and how that'll impact taxes and services in schools. So it is a really delicate balance, but I see that being a big part of this next chapter of Williston.
Great. And is there any way that if folks want to reach out to you or learn more, is there an email or a website that they can go to?
Yes.
I know, that's the big question.
My website is beckettforwilliston.com.
Great, thank you so much. And Ted, it's a little bit of an amalgamation of questions there,
Okay.
but what's your vision for the future of Williston, and just anything else you'd like to leave your constituents with here?
Sure. Well, I'm pretty hopeful about the vision of Williston in the future. I think we've done a good job with the growth that we've experienced and trying to manage it. You can't really control it. And I think that's something that some people would disagree with me on Front Porch Forum. But it's, these are private properties, and so managing them and using zoning in that way is I think we've done a really good job with that. The form-based code that we were talking about earlier is, just again, I think that's going to be an amazing vision for Williston when property starts getting backfilled in near Hannaford's and Shaw's, well, maybe Hannaford's and behind Texas Roadhouse and these places. Those are, probably going to be developed, and the way they're going to be developed with form-based code is good. But I do think that we need to continue to make sure that we provide the I guess I'd call it the infrastructure. That's probably not the right word. For our community, our sense of community, our sense of belonging, our sense of neighborliness. The library is looking like there's a renovation that we're going to be talking about at the Select Board meeting tonight that is incredible. And the library is a gem of the town. Whether we have a community center or not is also going to be talked about in the next coming years. That's going to be a major decision for voters because it would be expensive to build one. The question is it going to be too expensive? But keeping our sense of being neighbors, keeping our sense of being Vermonters, where everybody knows everybody, and frankly that helps keep our discourse more civil, because it's not a one-time hit when you say something nasty to somebody on Front Porch Forum or emails or whatever, because you're probably going to run into that person. And we need to keep that sense of community while we continue to manage our growth and hope that we have an economically viable place where our kids can live in the future.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you both for joining us, Ted and Ellie. And thank you all for tuning in this afternoon to this Uncontested Williston Select Board Candidate Forum. You can find this forum and all of our other forums online at cctv.org/TMD2025. We're 2 weeks away from the election, so don't forget to vote on or before March 4th, and then tune in to Town Meeting TV that night at 7 p.m. for our live election results show. All right, thanks for watching Town Meeting TV. Have a great night.